Well, so just on the Bitcoin one, so you talked about, your bull case on Bitcoin is essentially as a store of value. We'll talk, maybe it becomes a payment thing and we can talk about when and why. I don't think that's likely. But Bitcoin as a store of value is kind of like the bull case for holding it. Is this, just so I understand, is this like the digital gold theory essentially?
Essentially, yeah, it is effectively that no single, that it's well, I mean, it is inflationary, but in a predictable way with a limited ultimate supply. And, you know, it can't be changed. Like it's basically the only money on earth, where you can predictably say that the policy, it hasn't since its genesis. And, there have been wars trying to change it and it hasn't.
Right.
And that, you can have pretty reasonable confidence, and it becomes more lindy that the monetary policy won't change as it continues to grow. Um, the key there, though, is that you have to have a continuous supply of people who believe in that, right? For there to be demand to buy it.
Right. Right. Well, it's just like supply and demand. So so we're saying in a sense that like the Bitcoin bull case from here is it replaces some percentage of the gold market cap, if you will, right? As like digital version of where people would store their money as an alternative to
I
gold.
mean, I think there's a scenario where it exceeds it, that like every new person being born is probably not, is a net new Bitcoin buyer versus a net new gold buyer. So over like a long-term horizon. But for that to happen, it probably needs to be more useful than something you just store in a cold
Correct.
wallet and don't ever use. People are trying to do that with like Lightning Network for payments. We're going to need more products that allow for the financialization of Bitcoin. Like today, I can't really use it very easily in a secure manner as, collateral for loans and things like that. So, I think those things have to happen for the Bitcoin bull case to continue to play out, and they haven't yet.
Yeah. I think it's fair to say that like Bitcoin as a utility, like I can use it and spend it, proactively is probably, I mean, you said it best, right? That's still highly speculative. If we just do this is my like digital coin challenge with this, or sorry, digital gold challenge with this. So gold has been around as a global store of value culturally for what, 3,000 years, 2,000 years, something along those lines. So we have like history and wars and regime changes where gold has, matured. So the gold market cap today, if you look up all the gold in the world, essentially is about 10 trillion, give or take, right? Depending on the day. So it's about a $10 trillion market cap that has evolved over about 3,000 years as a store of value. And I agree, it's hard to buy gold, although actually most people don't actually hold the gold. They hold paper that represents the gold, but we can leave that aside for 1 second. So if we say like the bull case for Bitcoin is that it takes some percentage of the gold market, because good luck trying to replace this store of value that's existed for 2,000 years, like from before Jesus. So Bitcoin's current market cap is what, something like 800 billion, a trillion, something along those
Yeah,
lines.
so the store value bull case is only like to your point, it's only a 5 to 10x from here. I do believe, unlike you, that there is a world in which gold definitely not, in which Bitcoin, because it's easier to transport, it's, easier to divide, that it does become a medium of exchange, but it needs to move to a much larger scale and a significantly lower volatility for that to happen. Like you, I mean, I'm not the biggest Bitcoin bull in the world. So in other words, I'm not somebody who says, hey, Bitcoin, like I read Michael Saylor, it goes to zero or it goes to 1 million. I'm not one of those folks, right? I would say the upside is, to your point, on a expected value basis, probably, fairly capped.
Yeah, I think that's like, to me, if the digital gold argument is always a challenge, because if you say, all right, let's give this scenario the upside that it's like half the global value, like it splits the market with gold, which is, I mean, we're talking about something evolving over 3,000 years versus like 10. So let's say over a 30-year window of time, Bitcoin incrementally takes over this digital gold use case. Because right now, that's the only real use case for it, to your point.
At scale. Yeah. That's why the bulk of people are holding it. I think a true like Bitcoin believer, and I'm kind of a tepid one, would say, well, again, it's kind of a chaos play, a schmuck insurance play, like when I originally bought, and it's to say that fiat currency just goes off a cliff, and that people actually, that even the gold market, by the way, could grow beyond its current level, and that Bitcoin could as well, because fiat money, which is relatively new, hundreds of years old at scale, uh, finally just fails an experiment. Again, that's an extreme case, but that's the one that you get from the Bitcoin.
If that happens, we have bigger challenges
I
because
would
there are
say we
people with
probably
guns
do.
without governments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to just close that though real quick. So I would say most Web3 believers, I'm actually probably one of the few who feels like still Bitcoin is important to the success of Web3 because it's the cryptocurrency that most people reference. And I don't think it will have failed if it does increase by 10x, if the market cap gets to 8 to 10 trillion. And I'd love to see that and think it's important. And I think it's probable that it does. I do think it gets bigger than gold. I don't think many people who are entering the markets today have the memory that you just talked about like, like Bitcoin's already at $1 trillion. I don't know how long it took gold in its first 10 years, to get there. But I would just argue that I think like, I'm one of the few folks who think Bitcoin is important to Web3 success because it references people's opinion and perception of crypto overall.
The challenge with that analysis in my head is like the reason we think something should be a digital gold alternative, if you will, is because it's like an inflation hedge, right? Like why do people own gold? It's because it's viewed as an inflation hedge. So the bull case of the use case for a person, like why am I holding this in a non-speculative manner, right? Because we're still in the speculative phase right now.
Correct.
But if we say, all right, over the next 30 years, let's just use 30 years as the example here, we're going to exit the speculative phase, we're going to enter the utility phase, and the utility on Bitcoin as digital gold is inflation hedge. Here's the challenge. It doesn't act as an inflation hedge today. So now we have to do this like logical leap that it will. And let's say it like incrementally starts to stabilize from even just a pricing standpoint, let alone an inflation hedge, although it's like more correlated with the NASDAQ than it is anything else. Maybe it gets to like half the market cap, like 5 trillion and 5 trillion with gold, just to keep it simple. That's a 5x over 30 years. And on an IRR basis in a bull case, that's like 6% IRR.
So just why, so one, it's returned more than that. And it's not an inflation hedge on a day-to-day basis. It certainly is a speculative hedge on any, multi-year horizon, like the ones that...
Well, those are two words that don't go together. Speculative and hedge are not the same thing, right? Like it's a speculative asset that it might become a hedge. I think that's probably a reasonable take. But like, even if it does become a hedge, and we're talking about being the exact same market cap as gold globally, we're at a 6%-ish, you could do the math, IRR over a 30-year window for that to replace gold for a use case, by the way, which is inflation hedge, that doesn't actually work yet.
So the issuance inflation does work, and the price, again, over any reasonable term has, allowed somebody to preserve their wealth better than fiat currency. And I would say a reasonable term is like multiple years. I'm not talking...
Right, but in inflation hedge, definitionally, from like a financial investment standpoint, goes up as inflation, right? Like you can kind of like stick your money into this thing as inflation is going up and is not correlated with the stock market. And so if you look at like Bitcoin's correlation with traditional assets right now, it's like highly correlated with the NASDAQ and the S&P and kind of uncorrelated with gold.
Okay. So I would say I would probably back off the definition then and just say I allocate a portion of my net worth to Bitcoin because I view it as like a long-term store of value, meaning it's storing money. Yeah. So maybe inflation hedge is the wrong term according to that definition, but I wouldn't say that it negates. And I also, we're taking as given, you continue to make the assumption that the 8 trillion number is a cap. And I would say that if you believe, as I do, that Bitcoin's a better gold, you don't, because you're saying, hey, it has history. And I think that's less important than the other aspects of Bitcoin and that it's programmable. It's much easier to divide. It's portable. That those things are beneficial and that the market cap could actually be larger than gold. And you still have the option value on it potentially being a medium of exchange, which I know you're discounting. So I don't want to take that ceiling as a given.
It's just kind of crazy to me that anyone would hold an asset where like its bull case over a 30-year window looks like single digit IRRs. And by the way, to
But
get
again,
to
you're
that bull
going back
case,
to the 8 trillion number. So I'm saying I'm not.
fine, call it 10 trillion,
I will
right?
say a funny anecdote in this though is, Zach, I tend to come down where you are in all of this, but I do remember we were looking at Uber in at Battery way back when, and I remember the note so clearly saying that 1 billion, like Uber's raising at $1 billion, JetBlue's market cap is only 2.2 billion, and therefore, like, why does this even make sense? And so I tend to skew where you are, but I do think that anchoring point. I mean, we have seen whenever they show those charts of like how quickly things get on a social graph, like how long the telephone took, how long the whatever versus TikTok, we are seeing expansive growth to some cap, and to your point, that cap we might hit the ceiling pretty soon on this when you remove all the speculation, but the speed at which it could get there, I don't want to
Not
discount
only that, but like you actually have developers working on turning Bitcoin into a more useful form of money. I just don't know that you have that you don't have that with gold, right? I mean, you have people trying to find
like what is that Bitcoin payment use case, right? So we've got this asset that has $1 trillion in value. It has a theoretical utility of an inflation hedge, but it doesn't actually work as an inflation hedge right now. So like we're not there on the basic use case. It has this theoretical value of like it's going to be used at a payment model, but it doesn't actually work as a payment model today. And then we have this theoretical use case of like people are going to build cool stuff on top, but that actually doesn't exist today. So like the top 3 bull cases for, and this is just Bitcoin to be very clear. I agree. There's totally other parts of the spectrum. And in that bull case, I'll even give you the $10 trillion one, right? Instead of 5, it takes over gold. It goes to 10 on a 30-year basis. What's the IRR of a 10X fund? 9%, 8%. Like this is a bad investment.
I can ask some of my friends in VC that live that math.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of like not a great investment given the bull case.
I full disclosure, I am not trading Bitcoin out of our fund nor investing.
No, and I actually think that's really important, by the way, which is that like most venture groups, Bitcoin is more of like a personal holding as opposed to a venture investment. I think that's really clear, and that's why I like to separate it out, because I do think like Bitcoin is just like own separate, almost like cultural thing from the rest of what theoretically, crypto can do. Because
Zach, do you own any Bitcoin?
No.
Okay, got it. Yeah,
not because I have anything against it. Like I too would be okay, I guess, holding on a bull case 9% IRR, but like I'd rather own like I don't know rental properties in the Southeast who have people who actually pay rent for a physical asset. To me, that's like a better thing to own.